Right. On that note, I want to bring in my first guest. She's a corker. She's somebody I've admired for a very, very long time. And she's definitely worthy of decent admiration. Let's bring her in. Here she is. Wonderful Jane Senior. Good morning, Jane. How are you?
Good morning, Sonia. I'm fine, thank you, on this cold, freezing Friday morning.
Oh, you're up north, aren't you? You're up
I
north.
certainly am, yes. Yeah.
It's not too bad down here. I always like to go out in the garden before I start the show. And actually, it wasn't like it has been. I couldn't see any, breath in front of me this morning. So it's not too bad. But then I'm down south, Jane. Slightly different, slightly different. It's lovely to have you with us, Jane. As you hear, I've admired you for a very long time. You're a whistleblower, you're an author, you're a protector of children. Thank God, because we need more people like you. You were managing a youth project set up by Rotherham Council, right? You were working with girls, young women at risk of sexual exploitation. You worked for well over a decade. I think it was about 14 years. You were trying to expose it. What were you seeing and observing when you were working with these young people?
I think just to put a little bit of context into the history of what happened in Rotherham, I began this journey in July 1999, where I was successful in applying for a role in managing a youth work project. So my background is youth work. And over the next 12 years, we worked with in excess of 2,000 children that were involved in child sexual exploitation, in being trafficked, in being tortured. And over that period of time, I wrote weekly reports, monthly, quarterly, yearly, met with a significant number of senior people that had the resources and the powers to actually do something. And as we know, following Alexis Jay's report that came out in 2014, where she gave a conservative estimate of 1,400. That's now increased as the National Crime Agency's got involved. That absolutely nothing was done, and those that had the power to do anything, as we sit here today in 2025, nobody has ever been held to account for what happened in my little town. And we are a little town, just over 250,000 people live in Rotherham. So statistically, you know what I mean? I was asked to do a piece of work a few years ago, literally looking at the people that I could remember in a senior position. We have to remember this is not about social workers and police officers that may have had poor or good practice. This is them that could have done something to change. And I could identify over that 12-year period 84 people in a senior position that knew what was happening in my town.
84 in your small town, Jane.
And that was either people that had sat around a table and met, or people that had actually received the evidence. And what you have to remember about our evidence, it was more intelligence. So the children would talk to us, tell us what were happening. We had an intelligence report that had been updated, developed by South Yorkshire Police. So it's not something we made up on back of a cigarette packet. It was an official document. And, as things changed and we started to identify patterns quite early in the process. And somebody that I know actually developed as a database. And our database didn't just contain the names of the children. We began to identify perpetrators, their names, their addresses, their dates of birth, properties of concern, places that we knew children were being taken to. So we would collate that, we would put the statistics, the information, put it into reports, and anybody that would listen to us, we would sit around a table and talk about what was happening in Rotherham and what were happening to our children. Another thing that we identified when I started in 1999, we kind of saw that the age, it was predominantly always girls. Up to about 2005, we began to identify some boys. And the ages were about 15 to 18. By 2007-8, the youngest child that we were working with was 9 years old.
Oh, Jay, no, no, no. This is unbearable for me to hear. Like you, I'm very much involved in the safeguarding of children and the protection of children. To hear that is absolutely gutting. You wrote a book about your experience. Let's Broken and Betrayed for 14 years. So you try to help girls from Rotherham. And it's quite astonishing the amount of roadblocks that were put in your way. Some people still insist to me, Jane, that that never happened, right? That it never happened, that the police weren't interested in taking this up. But that's just a lie, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to speak to them people. You know, I mean, I managed that project. I've got a team of youth workers. But I also would have a caseload and I would cover and I would work with children if I needed to, or if I was short-staffed. And I'd love those people to sit in front of me and, you know, deny the child that cried in my arms after being brutally raped and, you know, and all the other things that my staff had to experience. How we all have not come out of this with PTSD, I do not know.
Well, exactly. I hope you've been decently debriefed, though, and taken care of, Jane, because it's a lot to take on board.
Never been offered a counselling session throughout all of it. Yeah, none of us were.
The thing is, my understanding is not only are you taking on board what these victims have endured, but you're also dealing with a system that refuses to acknowledge it exists. So you're hit from both sides. That is really psychologically problematic. You absolutely should have had counselling. It's outrageous. Paul says, well done, Jane. The police should be doing what you were forced to do. And that's the point, isn't it? Is people like you, Jane, were forced to do what the police should have been doing. And I want to know from you why you think those roadblocks exist. Was it a cultural issue? Was it cultural sensitivity?
The difficulty with this one is I will never actually 100% know what the truthful answer to this. All I can share with you is what I was told in meetings. So these children were consenting. How you consent to being abused, I will never know. They wouldn't make good witnesses on a stand. Do we know any child that ever would make a good witness? They were returning to their abusers. Of course, they were returning to their abusers. They were absolutely petrified. If you're having a gun held to your head or being threatened or having petrol porn on, why would you not return to your abusers when you are 12, 13-year-old? The most common one that we were told is their stories were so far-fetched, they had to be lying. So rather than actually listen to actually, are they far-fetched or are they actually true? And these children are petrified. It was just stopped. I was also told I was causing issues with the human rights, not the human rights of the children, the human rights of the perpetrators. We were naming them without having any evidence. And also I was told that if I continued reporting abuse, then actually I would be rocking the multicultural boat.
See, this is terrible. Every reason but protecting the child. Now, the thing is, obviously, you've worked with Alexis J. You know, the work that you did with Andrew Norfolk in exposing this through the Times, which was fantastic. I have lots of criticism about mainstream legacy media, but that was brilliant work. It was brave work from both of you. That triggered the Alexis J review, which in turn, Alexis J was then chosen to head up the actual National Child Abuse Inquiry. And you were recently on a panel, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
Talk to us about that.
So following Alexis J's, it was a 7-year inquiry into child abuse across everywhere, the church. It wasn't, you know, just about Rotherham again. It was literally across the UK. And Alexis J put 20 recommendations together, very good recommendations. Some of them do need a bit more work on them. None of them up to last week. Sorry, I just need to cough on you.
Go for it. Go for it. I'm very grateful Jane joined us, by the way, because if it was this time last week, you wouldn't have been able to hear her. So thank you, Jane. I'm glad you're a bit better today anyway. But yeah, so up to last week, you're saying?
None of them had actually been implemented. So last week, one was implemented. So the one that I wanted to speak about that is quite a passion for me. I mean, all of it is a passion, but the one that kind of resonates with me quite strongly, both personally and also trying to get answers for those that have been affected by this, both the victims, the survivors and family members, is mandatory reporting. Now, I'm not the expert on this. I'm not going to pretend to be, but I've got lived experience. Is if we fetch mandatory reporting in and we put some teeth in with it, so it's kind of a criminal offence to not actually report child abuse, especially on a significant scale like it was in Rotherham. My belief is we'd only have to put one chief constable, one director of children's services or one chief exec in front of a court of law for actually not doing their job, then actually we probably would see safeguarding and child protection change across UK, because would you want to be the next one?
Ooh, I mean, the thing is, why haven't those recommendations been implemented? We see these Tory ministers jumping up and down about the problems to do with Labour, and there's problems with all of them. But it's very opportunistic because they were in power and they were in a position to implement those recommendations, right?
Yeah, and I think all we've seen for weeks is politicians tearing chunks out of each other.
Yes.
Why is this political? Why is it not like cross-party? Why is not everybody standing up and actually fighting, not only for the children that this has affected historically, but what about our children, our grandchildren? What about those children in the future? Or what about the children today that this is happening to?
Yes. Now, you've just triggered me on something, right? And triggered is very much aware. There's loads of comments coming in all over the place, Jane, all on our social media, on our live stream here. And people really support what you're saying because it's so vital. But so the thing is, well, wait, what was it that you just said that triggered me? What did you just say prior to that?
Children today, future children.
That's exactly it, right? Is that, sorry, senile here. So that's exactly the point, Jane, is that everybody thinks this is a historic situation, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying this is still ongoing.
Absolutely. I can only use Rotherham as an example. I know it's happening everywhere, but you don't get two damning reports and abusers just think, well, we better not abuse any children anymore. We still see this. I currently manage a charity that works with children and also works with survivors of child sexual exploitation. And we're now seeing the next generation where we've got survivors whose children have become embroiled in this. And it's the wheels of turning to actually get anybody to act, to listen. Is it better than what it was in the 2000s? Yes, absolutely. But is it working 100%? No, it isn't.
I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot of kind of a foot shuffling going on within Labour at the moment. There are accusations that Labour have benefited from political votes as a consequence of this situation, about the fact that it's kind of like heavy Muslim, Pakistani, British, and Labour has benefited from those political votes by not doing anything about it. Do you think there's truth in that?
Do you know what, Sonia? I don't know. I was reading about this when you'd rung me last week and asked if I'd come on the show. I spent most of the weekend kind of like reading and kind of seeing a lot of comments on this. But I wouldn't have oversight or insight, and I don't think anybody would share that with me anyway, because obviously I'd go public or I'd speak about it.
I think this is what people like about you, is you're transparent. And the thing is that you're not afraid to take on any kind of organisation. You're up against the IOPC. Talk to people about Operation Linden and the IOPC.
So Operation Linden was a 6-year investigation that actually came to fruition in June 2022. And Linden was a £6 million investigation where the IOPC were actually looking at police officers, just police officers, and kind of looking at who'd failed in their duty. And Linden is all about the junior cops, literally maybe up to sergeant. And in 2019, I made the decision that actually Linden wouldn't go far enough. How can junior cops be they may be responsible for bad practice, but how can they be responsible for resourcing and taking on huge investigations? It was their bosses that were responsible for that. So, in 2018, I made a decision that I was actually going to do a complaint into the whole of the senior command team across South Yorkshire for failing.
That takes some courage, mate. That really does.
For failing in their duty under direction and control to protect these children when they knew what was going on. What I never expected is what would come from that. So initially, I went through the channel of the police internal complaints department. It was turned down. I appealed. I was told very clearly if I continued complaining about senior cops, I would be made into a vexatious complainant. Yet I was doing statements weekly for Linden for the junior cops. So I appealed to the IOPC, who came back and basically told me that there was legislation that if I was deemed as a vexatious complainant, I could be looking at up to 2 years in prison. I kind of sat back and I spoke to my husband, who supported me throughout all of this, and thought, how can a youth worker and a charity manager be threatened with prison for complaining about senior cops? How can that possibly be right? And how can I be threatened with getting locked up for it? It just took me back to the same intimidation when I went to Andrew Norfolk. So I made a very difficult decision and I complained again. Eventually, in 2019, my complaint was upheld to be investigated, and it became known as Operation Amazon. And I was told that it would be done and dusted by Christmas. I just forgot to ask them which Christmas. And in June 2022, I was given a copy of that report, and it was fully upheld in its entirety.
Amy, I think you've already answered Amy's question. Amy wants to know if you've been threatened. Well, we've heard that you've been threatened by the state and the authorities. Have you ever been threatened by these perpetrators?
I have by one of them, who for some reason or other thought sending pictures of his penis would intimidate me in any way. Left me a lot of voicemails and etc. I've had a few on Twitter. Basically, I've lied, I've made it all up, etc. I tend to ignore that, Sonia. I think way back it kind of upset me. Now I just think, well, I know my truth. I stand to my truth. And the one that was sending me pictures of his body parts did end up with an harassment order. But yeah, I've had all sorts of harassment.
I bet.
But I've had more harassment from people in positions of power than I have from any perpetrator. When Andrew did his first story that came out about Rotherham, I was kind of the secret whistleblower. I'd not actually exposed, it was me. And the first thing that Rotherham Council did was launch an investigation into who was the whistleblower. Now, why did they not launch an investigation into who are these people that are raping our children? I'll never know. And our local paper did a story about it, obviously, and the police made a comment that the whistleblower had caused significant damage to my town. And you think, wow.
This is gaslighting, Jane. This is literally you put your livelihood, your life, your family, all of it on the line to do the right thing, right? And I understand where you're coming from. You and I have trodden quite similar paths in terms of exposing situations and the problems that come from it. It's basically gaslighting because so it's the absolute attack on whistleblower. We need to protect whistleblowers. That's your thing now, isn't it? We need to protect whistleblowers.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't roll out red carpets for whistleblowers. What we do is we vilify them in any way that we possibly could. You know, and I look back, you know, to when I was told that Operation Amazon had been fully upheld, and the emotions that I felt, because I thought at long last, these children that are now adults have got an answer that actually people did know what was happening. They weren't lying. You know, and they can stand up and say, you know, we were always telling the truth and this report proves we were. But there was a big but that came with that, Sonia. So they said I needed to be very proud. This had never been happened before. But if I put Amazon out in the public domain, those senior officers would sue me.
Can we just rewind on that just a second, Jane? Because this sounds like it's impossible. Right. So they're telling you that senior police officers will sue you if you talk about an investigation that involved you. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the independent office that hold police officers to account actually are saying to me, if you put this report in the public domain, these senior officers that we've investigated will sue you.
Whoa.
So at the moment, I'm battling that in lots of different ways. I've got a couple of MPs that have been supporting me to kind of get that. People need to see that report, you know, and people need to be named and held to account.
And they don't want it. And this is the problem, is that what happens, unfortunately, Jane, I don't need to tell you this, but oftentimes they're protecting, you know, the party or the business or the authority rather than caring about individuals who are harmed within that. You're very much about protecting the individuals, and that is a problem for them. And that's why you're literally taking on a mountain, and you've been doing it for a very long time. You're formidable. How do you manage this? How do you manage to stay so upbeat and optimistic given all of this raining down on you?
Just knowing it's the right thing to do. It's the morals that my parents gave me. It's the support I get from my family. And it's on behalf of every victim, be it child or adult, that needs an answer. You know, and I look back from reporting these senior officers, so not Lyndon, Amazon, being pulled up for having no tax when I was taxed, having no insurance when I was insured. And I remember
harassment.
Yeah, buying a brand spanking new car, driving out of the showroom car park 1 mile down the road and being blue lighted for them to do vehicle checks.
Oh.
I had a riot van turn up at and I can evidence all this. I don't have to lie. I can evidence everything. I had a riot van turn up at my house at 10:30 at night to speak to my 17-year-old son at that time because he'd not posted a parcel.
I mean, people are already talking about fundraising for you, Jane, if you should need it. I mean, we will definitely, if they come after you, we'll get behind you like nobody's business. That much I can reassure you, because I absolutely love what you do. You're literally the best of us. She's a national treasure, people. She's literally the best of us. So, Jane, like moving forward, what can we actually do? Because it's ongoing. There's clearly a problem. There's all manner of obstructions. Yvette Cooper wants local inquiries. What do you think about that?
I really, really struggle with this one, and I kind of sit in the middle because I kind of look at it from what's positive, what's negative. And if we were going to have a national inquiry, what I don't want, and I'm speaking for myself, it's personal, I don't want a national inquiry that's going to last 7 years, and at the end of it gives me statistics, because that's kind of a waste of public money.
We just had all that, haven't we, really?
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Local inquiries, are they going to be handpicked? Who's going to make the decision on where they're going to be? You know, and I think we need to start with looking at these 20 recommendations. I'm quite happy to send you a copy if you've not got them, Sonia, and you can put them on your channel. But that's where we need to start. We need to kind of go back to them and kind of pick them up. Yes, some do want more work on them. Some will take longer. We can't just write law and legislation and implement it in a day. Last week, they changed the timeline very quickly to when you can come forward and claim compensation for child abuse. So if we can do something like that quite quickly, shall we get his finger out and start working on the others?
Yes, I'm totally for that. We'll support you 100%. Do you think it was helpful, the recent stuff to do with Elon Musk when he raised up the issue of so-called grooming gangs? Is that helpful?
I think the fact that he's brought it back to everybody's attention, because this has been an issue that's either in the public domain, then it goes away, then it comes out again, and it's kind of, shall we just forget about it because nobody's talking about it? Or shall we ask these children if we can just forget about what happened to them? Because if you're suffering with trauma and PTSD and everything else that's might have gone on, you know, in the last 10, 15 years, then actually they deserve a voice. They deserve to be heard, and they deserve some justice, whatever that justice may look like. And obviously as well, probably not obviously, sorry, that's a wrong choice of word, but also if we look at it from a politician's point of view, and I'm not a politician and I don't want to be, let's look at the public person also. What is it costing? And I put some figures together, which I'll very quickly read out. Sonia.
Please do. She gets it, Curly Cruz. She definitely does. We love Jane.
And I call this the cost of doing nothing, because if you look in Rotherham, we did nothing. So actually by doing nothing, so some of these are absolutely spot on that I know, and some of them I've kind of Googled to get some figures. So the National Crime Agency are in Rotherham investigating historical crimes against children at a cost of £100 million plus. We've got Professor J and Dame Louise Casey, which is an unknown amount, but was probably quite a substantial one. Operation Linden was at a cost of £6 million. Rotherham Borough Council did 6 local investigations, £425,000. Police and Crime Commissioner did 2 investigations, 210,000.
Wow.
So if we look at how many people we've actually had in a courtroom, and this is where I've Googled this information, barristers to defend our perpetrators in court for approximately 437 days, just looking at what we've had up to now, is probably £2.5 million.
Oh my God.
1 year in prison costs approximately £40,000. Sorry. Yeah, so we've had sentences of sorry, Sonia.
Not at all. You're doing brilliantly.
1,323 years of sentences. That would have cost us £52 million. So that's approximately £180 million. Remember, Rotherham is a small town. That was not taken into consideration all the investigations into me, the cost of the Home Affairs Select Committee,
Shocking.
Yeah, the investment in support services in Rotherham. Think about the cost to the health service. Can you imagine how eye-watering that probably would be? GPs, appointments, medication, PTSD. What did Operation Amazon actually cost? And at the moment, we've paid out, well, these figures are up to 2022. We've paid out 662,000 in compensation, but we've spent £3.6 million defending.
Oh, please don't. I hate that disparity. Oh.
So if you look at those figures, that's the cost of doing nothing in my little town.
So what is that, roughly, a ballpark of that in total?
I would say That's probably quite significantly over £200 million.
The cost of doing nothing is approximately over £200 million. Wow, mind blowing, Jane. It's almost like that money was paid to stuff it down, right? To make people believe that, because that is the problem, isn't it, about a lot of these inquiries, is it's just to reassure the public that something is being done. But as you say, we don't want one that goes on 7 years. We have to be careful about local, because there may well be people who are compromised. So it is really problematic. So what is the solution, though? What is actually the solution? Because if anybody knows, it's you.
I think as well what we have to remember if Rotherham was part of a local inquiry, then actually what do we do about the perpetrators that cross borders, or that came into Rotherham or went out of Rotherham to Sheffield, to Barnsley, Doncaster, Bradford, Telford, London? You know, how can we actually even oversee that?
Yeah.
So I think we need to start with these 20 recommendations. We do need to keep talking about this. We need to listen to what our survivors are saying. What do they want? We need to be investing in recovery services, because can you imagine if somebody said to me, here's 200, half of it, here's £100 million for counselling. Wow.
It could change everything, couldn't it?
It could change lives, change families.
What you do is literally phenomenal. You've just blown us away. Systems need tearing down, says Marcus, and it does. Where can we find Jane to follow her? We must support her. What a great woman. Thank God for her, says June. Indeed, I will put a link in the description. You can find Jane on X, formerly Twitter. But do read up more about this phenomenal woman. I'm so glad you joined us this morning. I knew you'd be phenomenal, and I knew that people would love you, because you deserve everything that's coming to you in all the right way. Right, you have really stored up your good karma, lady. You absolutely have, and I so appreciate what you've been prepared to do, because you were prepared to listen to these kids when nobody else would. When other people just said, you know, basically these are troubled individuals, you know, probably making up lies, you know, exaggerating for attention, and you got to the heart of it, and it's just amazing. Jane, how have the families of the survivors been treated through all this? Healing the Silence asks.
Quite despicable. So following following Professor Alexis Jay's report into Rotherham, we did start to see the narrative change in the press. So we saw it was 1,400 white girls. No, it wasn't. We had other girls from other ethnicities that were involved in this. It became 1,400 children in care. Did we have children that were actually in the care system? Of course we did. Were all of them in the care? No, we worked with some parents that did everything they could to protect their children. And I remember one parent once saying to me, and how do you answer this? When you know your child has been abused and you go to the police and you go to social services and they turn their back on you, where do you go? Well, where do you go? Because actually, these are the people that are resourced through government to actually protect and safeguard children. So we've had a lot of truth about Rotherham, but we've also had some of the narrative changed along the way.
Right. And that's why we need to be speaking to people like you who are legit and who understand what's really gone on and are not here, because you're not here as a party political broadcast. That's the thing, is that you're literally just telling what you've seen and what you've observed and what you've been prepared to put your neck above the parapet for. And we really appreciate it. Jane, thank you so much for joining us this morning. As you can tell from all the comments, I don't know if you can see them, but the support for you is literally phenomenal. Everybody's loving you here, as I knew they would. So thank you so much, everybody. This is Jane Senior. She's the author of Broken and Betrayed. I'll put a link in the description. That will certainly give you an insight into her and the phenomenal work she's done. But you need to update it, Jane. We want to know what is happening. I know. Is it too much to ask?
No, everybody says that. I look back and I think, wow, if I wrote a book now, it'd be, I don't even think they'd publish it. Yeah, it'd be dynamite. Yeah. But
it really would. But That's why we have to keep talking to you. Lovely to have you with us, everybody. This is, of course, as Mel said, a formidable woman. She is Jane Senior, and we love her. Take good care of yourself, Jane.
No,
Lovely to
thank
have
you.
with us.
Have a good day, everybody, and a lovely weekend. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. Take care, darling. Lovely to see
All
you.
right, then. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
What a star.
It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton.